Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Ellie, and I'm the manager of Enlighteens Education. Today, I have our senior consultant, Daniel, to share with us maximizing your admissions odds for private colleges. And Daniel has 10 years essay editing experience, and he helped students admitted to University of Pennsylvania, University of Chicago, Vanderbilt, Carnegie Mellon University in computer science major, Wesley College, and more. And we also invite our student Nathan from Dougherty Valley High School, who got admitted to Vanderbilt this year. Congratulations, Nathan. And
Thank you.
Sheila, yeah, Sheila, his mother, to share with us their experience of college application process. Hello, Daniel, Nathan, and Sheila. Welcome. But before we started, please let me introduce a little bit about Enlighteens and what we do. We are a group of educators who have many years of experience in college admissions consulting and working with families in the Bay Area and beyond. Enlighteens Education offers personalized college planning services and strengths-based mentoring approach to identify each student's characters, interests, strengths, opportunities, and discover a unique education path to realize their long-term goals. This includes guiding families through the confusing college applications process, course selection, extracurricular activities, summer planning, and test prep. Our offices in Cupertino and Pleasanton are home to our full-time consultants and support staffs with an average of 8 years of experience. Our years of teamwork also let us offer stability and a high level of synergy. So there are two parts of tonight's webinar. First part is Daniel's presentation and the student interview. The second part is Q&A. Now let me give the stage to Daniel and get started.
Okay, great. Thanks, Allie. I'm going to go ahead and get started because we have a lot to talk about tonight, and I want to make sure I give Nathan and Sheila enough time to share their experiences since they're taking time out of their weekend to be here with us as well. So a couple things I want to mention. Of course, you're here because the topic is all about maximizing admissions odds, especially for private schools. We've talked about in the past the difference between public schools, private schools, liberal arts colleges, large schools, small schools. There are a lot of different factors and strategies to consider when you're putting together your school list. So since we're around that time, getting ready for fall is coming up in a couple of months. Here's our agenda for today, just like what we saw already. So selecting majors in schools, understanding different admissions types and how that's going to affect your strategies, prioritizing extracurriculars, and utilizing summers that you have leading up to senior application, and also meaningful college essays. That's something you're going to hear me say a lot, meaningful, and I'm going to explain what that means exactly. Then we have enough time. I'm going to save enough time, right, for us to talk with Nathan and Sheila, and we'll have answers to your questions at the end. Okay. All right, so first things first. First topic is selecting majors and schools. Now, this is going to be more about, you've already done a lot, maybe leading up until senior year. And I'm assuming if this is a student who's, for example, coming to me already as a senior, right? So what does that mean for selecting majors in schools? Well, just keep in mind, remember that colleges across the board are saying this term, right? Holistic admissions, holistic review. What that means is they're looking at the student's overall profile. So long gone are the days of just, if I just get really high SAT scores, I'm going to get in, right? If I just get really high GPA, I'm going to get in. There's no such guarantee anymore. You've also seen in other studies and, our own presentations, the admissions rates are declining very, very quickly because we have more and more students and more applications, and we just don't have more and more colleges, right? We haven't grown much in terms of number of universities. Think about the last time the UCs added a campus was UC Merced, and that was already like 15 years ago. All right, so location and status. What I mean by this is the student's location and status. And by status, I mean what kind of applicant, what kind of admission type, what kind of, major, and just all those kind of things as well, right? Impacted majors. But location is actually really important because when you look into the details, and we have another study for this that we can share the results with you, but if you look into the details, the location of your high school has a huge, huge influence on your admissions chances into certain colleges. Just one quick example would be if you live in Northern California, it's actually much harder for you to get into UCLA. And the opposite is true, right? If you live in LA, you actually have a higher chance of getting into UCLA than UC Berkeley. So just a simple, right, quick example like that. Yeah, so status, I would be asking students like, by the way, are you like international student, right? Are you freshman? Are you transfer? What's going on? What kind of application or what kind of admission like program are you interested in? Is it going to be just freshman? Are you interested in going for, let's say like a, like a 3+2, where you also end up with a graduate degree? Just a lot of things to consider, right? Talk about when we even discuss the whole selecting majors in schools topic. Impacted majors, you may have heard of this, right? That basically is just a term for certain majors are really popular at certain schools. For example, computer science is basically basically an impacted major at most, if not all, right? Like top ranked schools, especially in this Bay Area, Northern California, since we're in the Silicon Valley. So even, a school like San Jose State has impacted majors, and CS, of course, being one of them. High school slash Naviance. Okay, so what I mean is there's a certain number of students that each college and university will typically accept from each high school. Okay, so that means your high school is actually really important as well, right? Not just your location. And Naviance or anything like that will give us, help you make a better decision. Like you get an idea of how many students you're actually competing with from your high school. I'll give you a quick example. I work with a student who, she went to Monte Vista High School in Cupertino, and at first she didn't want to apply to a certain school, and I asked her to check an Naviance and see how many students that school accepted from her school last year, and since the number was really low, and I said like, well, do you know anyone, right? Have you heard of anyone who's applying? So even things like that, right? Like maybe you could be the one, okay? But basically, she's going to Wellesley in the fall. And then I just want to keep that long story short. Common data set. This is something that's actually is completely open information, and you can actually look this up if you wanted to, manually for each university. They publish information such as average test scores, right, GPAs, things like that. But they also will let you know about maybe like gender or ethnic populations, on campus. So I know a lot of us are kind of worried or even concerned or just, confused about the affirmative action thing, that UC's announced. But if you look at common data set, you will see a historic trend, and that kind of helps you also place yourself within this kind of, like scatter graph of where you lie in terms of admissions. Okay. Yeah, but basically, what I'm trying to say is selecting majors in schools is highly personalized. There are many factors that I consider when I talk to students, and I cannot just, blindly support your list of majors and schools. If, I am interested in maximizing your chances of getting into a school, I'm going to give you, my honest advice and feedback, right? And usually I don't like to just tell you what to do, like students what to do. I really want to make sure, we're communicating and we're talking about what you like, and that's something, you'll probably hear in the interview. Okay, admissions types. There are 4 types basically. Early decision. This is binding. So for anyone who's unfamiliar, this means if you apply to a school ED and ED1 or ED2, that just means that the deadline is different. But if you apply early decision and they accept you, you must go. You have to go. So that means this should be your dream school, and so you have to go. And chances are you're not really going to be able to weigh financial aid options. So if financial aid is kind of a concern for you, then maybe ED is not the best strategy. But yeah, ED is you are really set on that school, or you would definitely go to that school, right, if they accept you. Now there's early action and there's restrictive early action, and the bottom 3 here are non-binding. So if they accept you, you don't have to go, right? There's no commitment. Early action just means you're applying earlier at the earlier deadlines. And a lot of people ask like, well, then why should I do early, right? What's the difference? Well, yeah, you might be able to see a slight increase in admissions rates, but if you look generally, the average is not a huge difference, but it is there. And that's because we have to think about colleges and their yield rates, right? The yield rate is what percent of accepted students actually attend that college. And that's really important to colleges. So if you apply early action, you're showing a higher level of interest to that school. So that means they're going to show a higher level of interest to you because you're more likely to go to their school. And again, that's good for their yield rate. Restrictive early action, this basically means you can do early action to this one school, right? Regular action, just regular deadlines, usually is like January 1st. And rolling admissions, just you apply anytime, first come, first serve kind of feeling. But yeah, those are the four types. Now that means if you're deciding about the four types, and if let's say I talk to you and you're interested in early decision, but you don't know which school, then we would really have to have that discussion. Should you actually do early decision? You're not in love with that school. You don't really know if that's your dream school. Yeah, maybe you really, really shouldn't. Okay, but maybe something more like early action would be up your alley, so to speak. All right, prioritizing extracurriculars. I get this question a lot. What should I be doing? What should I spend my time, volunteering? I hear, I should volunteer a lot. How should I spend my time? Well, if you don't really want to volunteer and you're already doing, or you have interest in something that's, because it's your own passions, your own interests, do that. And I'll be honest, right? Do that because think about, if we break it down, think about what volunteering means, right? It's you're volunteering your time and energy to help someone do what they want you to do. All right. That's kind of the basis of volunteering. But the other side of that is you want to do something and you have the passion, the dedication, and the commitment to make that happen. That's always going to be a little bit more interesting to colleges, right, than just simply raising your hand and going to volunteer. Because, of course, there are two types of volunteering, right? One where you just go because you feel like obligated, but there's the other type where you're really passionate about it, right? And maybe there's an organization that, of course, you can't start that organization on your own. So of course you're very committed, right, to that. And that I understand. But sometimes people ask me like, well, is there something I could just do, right? Like just do for the summer? I don't recommend that, right? That's kind of a waste of time. You should really explore. If you don't really know what you like, then actually I'm going to say explore, right? Explore what you like so that you can find out what you like, so that you can start to figure out who you are, so that you can show colleges who you are. Because by the time you apply to college and you still don't have an idea, that's going to be, make things a little tougher. Now, of course, you don't have to choose now. You don't have to choose the rest of your life at age, 17, 18. I tell all the students that, but at least have an idea. Nothing in life is, guaranteed or promised. You don't have to promise to college you'll never change your major, or go to grad school in something else. But you should at least have a good idea by the time you finish high school. All right. So again, I said meaningful. And I'm going to say meaningful a lot. So choosing meaningful activities that match. And what I mean by that is matching your profile, matching who you are, matching your personality. And meaningful is sort of, it's not just you went because you went, you did it because you did it, right? It means something to you. It's important to you. If you look ahead, if you look at the college application essay prompts, they ask about, oh, what's something that's really important to you, right? What's something meaningful to you? They really want to make sure that this is something you like. And you've probably heard this, the keyword passion, right? Dedication. It's almost like I almost tell my students to avoid using the word passion because, it appears so much in every college application. But it basically is that, they just want to make sure that you are really, really genuinely interested in your activities. So that's what I mean by prioritizing extracurriculars. In a sense, you are prioritizing yourself. Okay. Time is dedicated consciously because you've thought about this. Okay? You didn't just go sign up for something just because to fill up time. Best extracurriculars would lead to personal growth or understanding. And that's why I recommend, if you can, work experience is always one of the best things you can do. And colleges also see that. Whenever they see work experience on your profile, that means, right, it means to them somebody trusted you enough to hire you, first of all, which means you have this maturity, you have this, reliability, dependability, and those are all great things, all great qualities in just any adult. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for adults to join their college. Okay, so you want to show that you've become this very mature person. Based on student strengths and path to college, again, this is kind of like the first two bullet points mixed together, right? Like it should be something that you actually are good at, ideally, something that you like to do. So yes, extracurriculars can kind of line up with your major, but again, they don't have to, but it's your strengths. So your strengths could be something that's personality, right? It could be something like a soft skill, and you can still showcase that strength in your extracurriculars, even though it's not going to be directly related to your major. And that's something we'll talk more about. The details, of course, it's different for each person. Utilizing summers. We're in a summer right now. I asked some of my students, or I asked new students, hey, how's your summer going? What are you doing? Nothing. Yeah, this is a very common answer, right? Oh, my sleep schedule is all messed up. I just play video games a lot. Yeah, I've been stuck at home, so I just play video games. I watch movies. I don't really do anything. Maybe I'm taking an online course, sometimes a few days a week. Okay, that's fine, right? That's better than nothing. But I know this situation is kind of, awkward because of the stay at home, but typically, right, we'll be looking for things like work experience if you can, if you're of age, college courses, and that's something that's still accessible now, right? There are a lot of online classes. There are a lot of things you can do remotely, remote learning, remote education. There's almost no excuse. There's a lot of technology, right? You have the internet, so that means you have access to basically everything in the world, right, at your fingertips. So college courses, this is actually a perfect summer to kind of bunker down at home and just teach yourself a lot of things, right? This is a perfect time for that. Independent hobbies and interests. Again, I had a student ask me, what should I be doing? Well, I mean, you already like robotics, right? Like maybe you should just start coding. You just make things at home. Are you using AutoCAD? Are you doing 3D printing? Why not? Why not? If you're doing it at the club, why not do it at home? Now, of course, if there are financial reasons, limitations, resources, sure, makes sense. But still, maybe you could make the best of what you can, right? Do what you can with what you have, at least. The thing is always, I recommend, is just try, right? Just do it, just try. It might not go exactly the way you plan, but honestly, life, how many things in life really go exactly the way we plan, right? And you're not really going to know what you don't like unless you try. I have students, they tell me, I want to do business, right? It's a very common major. Like, I want to do business. And I ask them, what do you want to do in business, right? Business has everything. Business has anything from HR to sales to marketing to accounting to finances, right? Anything, managing stuff. And they're just business. Like, what does that mean, right? So you have to really go try it out. You have to go figure it out. Come back to us, right? Let's talk about it. What did you like, didn't like? And then so we can start narrowing it down, right? What fits you? So find activities that are, again, meaningful to your profile, right? Don't just try to fill it up with empty hours. Don't try to just fill it up with a lot of random activities. By you're basically your 11th grade, 12th grade years, you want to have a path and at least an idea of a path that you're narrowing it down, so the colleges can believe that you know what you want, and of course they want a student who knows what he or she wants. So that brings us to this word again, meaningful college essays. I have an English, background. I come from English, and in writing, I always tell students, writing is still a form of communication. Writing is not just like, oh, I have to read a book for English class and write this, this essay in 1 hour and turn it in, it's full of quotes. But writing, writing is more than that. Writing is still a form of communication, and you want to be able to communicate things about you clearly. And it's going to be tough for a lot of students because we don't really learn how to do this in school. For the first 12 years of our lives in school, we don't really learn how to talk about ourselves via essay, right? And that's why it can be very confusing, and it can also feel like we're bragging, and we don't want to. But I remind students, if you don't tell them, they're not going to know. Right? And it's also, we don't really spend a lot of time thinking about who we are. I always ask students, why? Why did you do that? Why are you the way you are? Why did you decide that? Usually I'm met with, I don't know. And sure, that's okay, but let's try to figure it out, right? If you can figure out who you are and why you are, that's going to be a lot easier for the colleges to know who you are because you can convey that now. So you have to convey a coherent theme. What is the message that you're trying to send about yourself in your essay? Because this is basically the only time that the colleges will get to know you unless there's an interview, right? So imagine all the public schools, especially the UCs. If there's no interview, then your essays are it, right? Now we're talking about private schools, but essays are still really important because not every school does interviews. It doesn't have to be related to the major. I know that a lot of us try to pick, right, like themes, topics, like, oh, my major, my major. It's okay. It really doesn't have to be because they're already going to know that you're really interested in your major because of your activities list, right? You already do everything related to robotics. So of course you love robotics. Is there something else that we should know about you, right? Are you a well-rounded 3D person or are you just robotics, right? Something to think about. But it can, of course, it can. If there's a really interesting story related to your major, go for it. Let's see. Highlight students' core values and personality. This is the angle that I typically go for. And you've seen a lot of success here because we're trying to showcase you as a person, right? You're not just a number. Public schools, you've heard, right, in the past, the UCs are typically just numbers game because there's so many applications. Private schools, liberal arts colleges, smaller schools, they really care more about who you are. So that means the letters of recommendation in combination to the essay and also letters of rec, interview, right, and also the essays. And the essays are really important. Why and how are questions that are more important than what. I've seen a lot of essays that are kind of like resume style, just listing I did this, I did that, and the end. That's just your activities list, but written in sentences, right? They don't need that. They don't want that, and they really want to. The colleges, they want to understand who you are, and to understand, we have to ask questions like why or how, and we have to ask that to ourselves first because they're not gonna ask to us because it's just an essay, right? They're gonna read it and they won't have opportunities to ask follow-up questions. So in a sense, it's like you're thinking of what they're going to ask and then answering those questions ahead of time, right? I usually compare this to like a job interview. I know not a lot of students have had job interviews, but for the adults, the parents, we understand that in a job interview, it's a two-way feeling, right? It's like, does the college fit me? But then do I fit the college? There's a lot of that kind of thought discussion going on. And that's what needs to be conveyed in an essay. And an essay is basically giving interview questions, answers. It's not super formal, right? I've seen essays that have like a thesis, topic, sentence. That's okay. We don't need that. It's really more kind of like creative writing, telling a story, giving good answers, just like a job interview. And then your meaningful college essays need to display maturity, self-awareness, and growth because colleges need to feel confident that they're picking, a person who is ready for college. That's why you see a lot of private schools, they ask, why us? Right? Why do you want to come to our school? Why our school and not any other school? Right? And then like, what do you bring to our school? And like, why did you pick your major? Why? We need to understand who you are. All right, so I know I went pretty quickly here. Right? Again, I want to give enough time to Nathan and Sheila to share their thoughts and feelings about this whole process. During this interview time, I'm also going to make sure to kind of weave in some of the things that I just talked about in the bullet points so that you can kind of see how this all comes together and how this worked successfully, especially for in Nathan's case, right? All the things that I just talked about in general. Okay, so at this point, yeah, I'd like to invite Nathan and Sheila to the panel here. Okay, great. All right. Yeah, and I'm just going to start off. So the first question, I think, for our panel here is going to be for Nathan. So actually, first of all, Nathan, if you want to introduce yourself just very, very briefly, maybe anything beyond what we haven't heard about you yet.
I guess there's not much else. Hi, I'm Nathan, and I'm at Vanderbilty University.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Maybe like some of the hobbies and interests that you had, the past couple of years. Yeah.
Hobbies, I guess sailing and water polo. I enjoy both of them. I like reading in my spare time, and I play video games too.
Yeah, and that's fine. Oh yeah, actually that's a thing I want to point out. I know like a lot of parents like, oh my kid just plays video games a lot. Like, okay, yes, but a lot of people play video games, like it's okay. But I understand if it's like too much, right? But we can also try to figure out a different angle. Like maybe there's something that we can learn from video games, right? And yeah. All right, so my first question is think back to our, when we first kind of met, remember it was in the office and we had a pretty long discussion with Ben as well. So any like initial thoughts, about the whole process, did you have something like this before, like a college counselor kind of thing? And, what were you thinking at that time?
It was a new experience for me. Like I hadn't had any sort of counseling before outside of like school. But I guess my initial thoughts were of like safety and trust. It was sort of an open space where I felt like I could get out what I wanted to without being judged, I suppose. And I was pretty new to college apps. Like I knew next to nothing about it at the time. So at first I was opposed to it a little bit, mostly because I just didn't really understand. I was like, what? I know my stuff. I can do this. But, once after talking with you guys, I realized there's like a ton of stuff that people don't tell you about that you need to figure out for yourself. And I guess after the first talk, I realized this, and I was like, this is good for me. This is the right choice.
Okay. So when you felt that moment, right? What were your expectations then moving forward, perhaps?
My expectations, from what I heard from other people, I mostly just expected to get help on my essays because that's what everybody kind of emphasizes the most in the college apps. But in actuality, a college counselor, in my opinion, is much more than just essay writing. It's all the stuff that Daniel talked about in the webinar before. And after the first session, the first few sessions, I came to realize that a college application is not just a bunch of essays. That's kind of my thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, and I can add to this is I remember the first couple of meetings with Nathan, I just wanted to get to know him. I just asked him very, get to know you questions, and I realized that, he also plays video games, and, he likes sports and water polo, and, just we basically talked about video games a lot, or not a lot, but yeah, enough, right? Yeah, like I could start to feel that Nathan has a pretty good head on his shoulders. Like he kind of knows what's going on in terms of how to handle himself, but maybe just missing some key information about like college application and stuff. And I just wanted, yeah, to kind of like guide him along, right? Help him there. Okay. So after that, right? Because we started working when you were still focusing on like raising your SAT and ACT scores. Yeah. So what about that? You want to talk about like that experience of trying to raise your scores and how that affected the college admissions process?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So in terms of my SAT score, I had taken the SAT twice before, and my score kind of plateaued off in the 1500 range, and I wanted to do better, but I don't know, I already took it twice, and generally 3 times is the limit, and so I was a little nervous about taking it again. And then Daniel recommended trying out the ACT because, it's a change of pace. And at first I was kind of skeptical because I was like, well, it's like the same thing, and I already took the SAT, like what's going to change? And also, instead of, having a like tutoring thing, like how I did with the SAT, this would mostly be self-study with some supplement. At the time, I wasn't like I didn't like self-studying very much. But, I said, why not? I'll just take it once. And the self-studying it went really well, in my opinion. Daniel helped me focus on the problem areas that I had with all the SAT stuff. It was more one-to-one rather than being in like a large group of people. And I actually ended up doing much better on the ACT than I did on the SAT. I got a 35.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, so I guess the thing I wanted to mention here is, yeah, sometimes students, they kind of just trap themselves in one test or the other. And the tests are actually very different, right? And that's again, another kind of thing of a small wrench, right? In all of this is what test do you want to take? SAT versus ACT. And generally students come back and tell me like, oh, ACT was easier. It felt easier, right? And especially students who kind of prepare a lot for SAT, like in Nathan's case, there was that initial hesitation, like, I don't want to study for another test. Like I've been taking SAT how many times now? And like, no, like I feel discouraged. Like I don't want to do this again. Like it's going to be stressful. Like what if I don't get a good score, right? That's going to be more discouraging. But yeah, sometimes the ACT is just a different fit for a different test taker, right? Style of test taker. And yeah, we can talk about that, the details another time. But yeah, that's good. So he was able to raise his ACT score. And I remember the day that he came back, right? And we looked up his score together in the office, right? And then he told me the score, and I was like, congratulations. And we basically looked over to the list of colleges, and I just said like, you basically just unlocked a bunch more, So yeah, that's something that we factor into. And that was not just because of his ACT score. It's because of I already knew the rest of his profile, right? And that was just kind of a little extra boost that could reach more schools. Okay, so speaking of your profile, right? We had a lot of activities that we kind of planned after we started working together. Things like the certification and things like that, right? And that whole summer. Yeah. So do you want to mention a couple of things that you ended up doing and your experience with that?
Sure. So under Daniel's recommendation, I took a summer class at Las Positas College, one of the local community colleges in our area. It was an anatomy class. That was probably the most fun I've ever had in any class ever, to be honest. There was a lot of hands-on experience. A lot of people like dissections, and I was like, oh yeah, dissections are cool too. But the class also offered hands-on experience with 2 cadavers, which are, if you don't know what a cadaver is, it's a dead body. and I got to experience that as well, and it was great. Another thing that I did under Daniel's recommendation was I found a job, and that was lifeguarding at a local water park, the Dublin Wave, and along with that, I had to get CPR and lifeguard certification from Red Cross. So essentially, that was under Daniel's recommendation as well. Finding a job and was pretty fulfilling. You feel like you do a lot of the work on your own, can kind of contribute to yourself, make a little pocket money. And I guess the CPR certification and lifeguard certification is more. It's like something that'll stick with you for the rest of your life. I'm not saying you need to go out and get CPR. I mean, it's good to, but you don't have to. Like, it's not. Look, babe. My point is, all of these things were really impactful on my life and on my college application, and I'm really glad that Daniel helped me find these opportunities that fit me as a person.
Right. Yeah. And that's the point here, I think, is hopefully you never felt like I was saying things like you need to do this to get into college, right? Like,
oh no, never.
Yeah, right. Like it wasn't like that, right? It was more just, hey, like, what do you like to do? Like, oh, you already like to swim, right? Like from sailing and water polo and swimming, swim team, like that just kind of makes sense. Like, hey, keep swimming, right? Keep going with your strengths. Yeah. And yeah, I remember Nathan telling me about the CPR class and like how in the lifeguarding, like he had to like drag, bodies and fake bodies. And yeah, it was like a lot of fun, right? And I was really glad to hear that he had fun with it because that's the whole point, right? Like, what if he just was adamantly like, no, I don't want to. Like, that's not interesting, right? If he had a closed mind, I don't think, right, like he would have found, all these different paths and directions that are open to him. Yeah, so speaking of like open mind, closed mind, right? Early on in our meetings, our first couple of sessions, right, we talked about like, oh, maybe you want to do healthcare, but then like you had some hesitations about healthcare. What do you think kind of eventually led you to kind of open your mind more about healthcare? Was there anything that we did together?
Yeah, so I've always been somewhat interested in sort of like the biology field, but like Daniel said, I was somewhat hesitant because, I wasn't sure if I would like really want to do it for the rest of my life. But the anatomy class that I mentioned before that Daniel recommended, that was sort of like the last push that got me thinking, wow, I really like love this. This is fascinating. I enjoy learning about this. And that was sort of the last push that I needed to commit, I guess, to wanting to be a doctor or a surgeon or something related to the healthcare field.
Yeah, and I remember we've had long discussions about it, and I think I just kept reminding you like this is your life though, right? Like it doesn't matter if other people want you to do this or that. This is your decision. This is your college experience and your career. Make sure that you want to do this. And I kept asking you about like lifeguarding and how that made you feel, like being there, and also your time, like at the hospital and helping others. So yeah, I could feel that like you started to really, or not started, but like more openly, right? Like genuinely really like to help others, especially through health. And I was like, good, I'm glad that you were able to find that for yourself. Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit. Let's move towards more like the college application essay and everything, the whole process now. So let's talk about the essay first. Do you want to talk about like the topic we ended up deciding for your main Common App essay?
So my main Common App essay was about, this may seem a little weird. It was about how I really enjoy reading sci-fi and fantasy novels. And at first I was like lost. I didn't know what to do as a topic, but I guess Daniel kind of put the idea in. He told me that a college essay doesn't just have to be about some significant life achievement or something you've done. The whole point is it's you. You want to be very personal about it, and I felt there was nothing more personal than going into the type of stuff that I did on my free time and how that stuff in turn affected my growth. And sort of like, oh, this certain book like influenced me in this way. This book made me see things in this sort of light.
And yeah, I remember, usually what I do with students and what I do with Nathan was I just ask questions. I basically just kept, interviewing him and like, oh, tell me about that. Like, oh, that's interesting, right? And
Hmm.
I don't know about Nathan. Maybe he felt like, oh my God, so many questions. But we were trying to get to a point where like, okay, what is the real you, right? Like, let's go really deeper and like, why do you do this? Why do you do that? And yeah, I remember he was asking me about, signing up for classes, and he's like, I really want to take sci-fi, but like, I don't know if I should because like, does it look good for college? Or like, maybe people want me to take a harder class. But no, no, no. Like you love sci-fi, like take sci-fi. And that gave you the opportunity to, talk to your sci-fi English teacher, right? And like all that kind of stuff. And
Hmm.
that motivated you even more to read, and that became a huge part of your essay. Yeah. And I know, maybe some other people, they might question you like, why did you write about reading if your major is not English? Right? Like why did you do that?
Hmm.
But that's kind of the point, right? Like you're not just what you are in your activities list, right? It's just the bigger picture. Yeah, so it does take some patience for us to find the topic and develop the topic carefully, because that was quite a process, right? We took quite some time. And I remember for a while, right, like Nathan was like, I don't know, like my brain, there's just so much stuff going on. And I was like, that's okay, right? But let me help you, right? Let me just take notes for us. Let me just, keep brainstorming, and let's try to piece this together, right? And yeah, I'm really glad that turned out really well, especially the essay. Okay,
Hmm.
so then a related question is, we worked on the process together. What do you think were just like a couple major things that you learned, you took away from the whole college admissions process after going through it yourself?
Uh, Start early is one of the big ones. If you're planning on applying to a lot of colleges like I was initially, it's a lot of work. And so people usually recommend that you start in your junior year summer. But honestly, in my opinion, maybe start thinking about it even further back. Another thing, if you're planning on applying to a lot of private schools, they're going to ask you the why us question. And I had some problem with those. And one thing I learned about that is if you're trying to answer those essay prompts well, you need to do like a lot of research about the college itself. Like what makes it unique? What do you like about it? And maybe through that research, you may learn that, oh, maybe I won't actually like this college, or maybe I'll like this specific school like way more than all the other ones. Mhm.
Okay, so I think I mean that's pretty much it. Unless yeah, is there anything else you wanted to share? Maybe just like a final piece of advice for younger students, or just like based on our time working together, just anything in general you want to anything else you want to mention?
Yeah, maybe just a small thing. For regarding counselors, if you want to make a real connection with them, you shouldn't just see your counselor as, oh, I'm paying him to, you know, help me out, or he's like teaching me. Um, for me, it was making like a genuine bond. Like I see Daniel as a friend, and I think that's what one of the big factors that came into like him helping me uh, for my essays and for my applications and for just myself as a person. A lot of stuff I wouldn't have bothered trying out, like finding a job. And I was like, no, there's no way I need a job. I'm just gonna stay at home, or like uh, taking a summer class. It's like if it was up to me, I probably wouldn't have taken that class. But Daniel gave me that little push. As a friend, he's like, hey, this would be like good for you. And I took that to heart, and look where it got me now.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure working with Nathan. He's kind of like what I've mentioned right in the first part of the webinar is having an open mind. And I think Nathan took that to heart. He was able to embrace a more and more open mind as we went on. And I'm really glad, it worked out, because I was sharing him with my own experience, like in my own life, right? My own college experience. I just kept an open mind. I just tried to explore a lot of different things, and that's why I fully, firmly believe that you have to try different things to figure out what you don't like. And there were probably things that, Nathan didn't like as he did more, and like, maybe I don't want to do that or that. And that's good. That's good.
Hmm.
Yeah, information is good. Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks very much, Nathan. So
No
yeah,
problem.
and we're
Hmm.
gonna move over to Nathan's mother. So this is Sheila. And first question for Sheila then is, as a parent, right? You saw Nathan working with me, over time. And just, I guess, what are your thoughts on your perspective, maybe how Nathan changed over time, how he grew as a person, things like that, from a perspective as a parent?
Yes. So the first thing, not only to him, I would have to include the changes on me as the parent as well. So first of all, for Nathan, as he said, he through you guys professional service, he definitely learned the reason that. So give a little background. We live in this community. Nathan's high school has 3,400 students. 70% are Asian, 70 plus percent, 70 to 80% Asians. Every year there are above 70 students admitted to UCB, UC Berkeley, and UCLA. So as you can imagine, this community itself naturally just it's enormous stress uh, on parents and on kids. So at the time when we decided we need to look for professional services, um, we because I feel like none of us know exactly what's ahead of us other than being very stressed out. So as what Nathan also said earlier, through you guys, he definitely learned a lot what he needs to get him better prepared, basically, to what's ahead of him, what's going on. And another point is I can see that the stress level, because these days kids are so stressed out and parents too, myself, you get all these things you hear in pieces from here and there, and you just get more stressed out. And in a public school, you barely get any hold of your counselor, so you don't get much help. So only to say that from mental health point, it helped both of parents and the student tremendously. So that is already a great gain, because of you guys, we could pass the last 2 years in a healthy way, and compared to it really can be super stressful. So that's one thing. Another thing, I feel like working with you, he gradually find his way, have a direction, and also he grow more self-awareness and more confident, and that's something every parent will be dream for especially during this last 2 years extremely stressful and difficult time. It's hard for kids, they have full day school, and everything on college application is outside of school. They have to handle so much. I mean, it's a journey. So the last thing I noticed is this process. The way Daniel worked with him, you would think that Daniel have a lot of English background. He teaches English in community college. He worked as a counselor so many years. He really knows how to write an essay. But what I'm really, really happy at the end is he didn't write a word for my son. Nathan's application completely is Nathan's. With the way Daniel helped him, Daniel opens him up, guided him, but this work is his own. And I probably never mentioned this to Daniel. And I, as a mom, I can never be more happy and proud because you didn't do you. I mean, I would imagine as an adult working with kids, maybe at times like it's so stressful. It's under a tight deadline, and it would be easier instead of for you to ask the why and just write the sentence for him. But you didn't. So I read my son's essays application. Every single word is come from Nathan, and that's with tremendous help from Daniel. So I cannot be more appreciated for that.
Yeah, of course. My pleasure. Good, happy to hear. Yeah, and it sounds like hopefully I was helpful, but yeah, it sounds like I was helpful. And what do you think were kind of the biggest things that I was able to help Nathan with? You mentioned that he did grow, he grew over time, but was there anything maybe within the college application process or outside, anything that you felt was the biggest help to Nathan, just coming from me? Yeah.
Definitely. So first thing is the ACT that you mentioned. I recall we started with Daniel after junior year already started, actually maybe a couple of months after, and being in a very stressful high school, we're lost. Sometimes I admit as a parent, I could be more harmful than helpful because I hear information here and there, and then I guided Nathan through, not complete stories, and he wasn't in a very good situation. I remember that after they had a couple of sessions, Nathan came back, said Daniel strongly think I would do better in ACT, and he strongly recommended me to take ACT for that. It had a very good turnout, and I have to be very honest that without Daniel's guidance, there's no way he's gonna go take ACT, because that's extra work and we don't know what that is. Most of us somehow know SAT better, so we would like automatically took SAT, and he did get to above 1500, but there's a plateau. Like, it's not bad, but it's not extremely outstanding, right? So that ACT suggestion turned out like that's after Daniel's understanding of who Nathan is, what is his strengths, and I would say that's a very professional suggestion, had turned out with very good result. That Nathan did, Daniel guided him with several, example sets and worked with him. It didn't seems like it took tremendous of time or pain, but his first try he got 35. So that was definitely very helpful. And talking about the activities, I remember this, that the junior year summer, which is extremely important. So we prepared for different things, and Nathan did get into a summer camp, if you recall, and Daniel, at the end we did everything and planned, and Daniel said, don't go to the camp, go find a job, go do this class in. I was like, okay, are you sure? So that camp I have to enroll within certain days, and then I keep dragging, and I asked Daniel at least 3 times, are you sure we're not going to a camp? Everybody is going to a camp, right? Daniel was absolutely sure. He had to assure me 3 times for me to withdraw that application, because there's a deadline I have to pay, otherwise you lose it. So I trusted their professional suggestion, and turned out this is a very fulfilling summer. Nathan worked as a lifeguard, which gave him tremendous real life experience, and I actually, through that experience, I could see it sounds easy, but it's not. The summer here is over 100 degrees. My son, there are times I didn't tell, I actually holding a milk tea outside, really want to drop it in, but I'm so proud he did it. He did it very hard work, and I can see, even though it's not as prestigious as what you think, but this is really good experience for him overall. It's also in a central theme of what his passion, his interest, where he's going. That's just some examples. For instance, the anatomy class, me personally, I'm a software engineer, and you all know that this is the hardest topic, and Nathan took AP computer science, and that's the only high school topic I could help. I couldn't help anything else. English wasn't my mother language. So I helped him a little bit on his homework, and I keep asking, don't you think this is really cool, really fun? A lot of parents are thinking this is the most booming, easier to find a job. But my child told me, Mom, don't you feel like figuring out how our body works is more fun? I look at his picture he's looking at, the words are so long, the muscles look exactly same to me. I couldn't understand why that's more fun than, programming, but I respected him because after all, it's his life. He needs to find his passion, and that's the only way he will do well. So that is also per Daniel's suggestion. And on the essay, the way Nathan told me how you guys work together, gazillion why, and I can see, as I said, it would be easier for you just finish that one paragraph, because I saw sometimes you guys are stuck on one paragraph, and Daniel has like tons of comments, and he's so stressed out. He has schoolwork, he has tests, and then yet he has to finish this. But no, this process, I believe, helped him in a very long run, like, this thinking process, not just for that one essay. I believe in the future, anytime when he needs to write something about anything related to his own, he will be much better. So yeah, overall, I feel you're very helpful to him as a person in a whole, not just this college application.
Yeah, and to add to that, I did see a lot of changes myself, right, in Nathan, and yeah, I did see his more, like I mentioned earlier, like he's more open-minded, right, more, accepting to things, and I could tell probably a little bit more trusting. Of course, when you meet someone new, and at this stage of your life, it's hard to have that complete trust or more trust. And I think this is what Nathan mentioned earlier, right? Because of this trust that we were able to develop with each other, that made the whole process easier. That made the tell me about your life, tell me about something that happened at the lifeguarding, or tell me about this. It's more of just an open discussion, and that actually helps speed things up, because then we're having a two-way discussion, not just I'm just asking him questions nonstop. But we can try to find, like, oh, actually, why did you like that? What was interesting about that? And we were able to find some great, other essay topics as well, like supplement essay topics. But that also comes back to just having an open mind and trying to do more things, outside of your comfort zone. And I think that's probably, one of the best things that we can do for our students is to, gently encourage them, but also making sure that they feel the agency, they feel that they are in charge of their lives. Because of course, naturally for any human, adults too, when we feel like we're told what to do, naturally there's going to be some resistance, right? Some fight back.
Yeah.
But getting to understand someone, I think, is kind of the key, and that's my approach. Yeah. So yeah. Thank you so much for, sharing, what you saw in Nathan. What we both saw in Nathan, and of course we wish Nathan, nothing but the best moving forward. And I know that he's going to have a really great, future. So best success, right, to all his future endeavors. And yeah, we really hope to stay in touch. Yeah.
Thank you for Nathan and Sheila for your nice sharing. The first question is, how important are activities and essays compared with GPA and standard tests when applying for colleges?
Okay, how important are activities and essays? I have to preface this by saying it does depend on what schools you're applying to. Like earlier, I said public schools are more about like numbers and such, right? Like GPA and test scores. There's a point where there's like diminishing returns, right? Like if your GPA is already really high, if your test scores are already really high, you don't really necessarily need to keep spending more time raising that, especially if it's not going to be worthwhile or fruitful. So when a student like that comes to me, then we really need to figure out your activities and essays. So I don't want to say like it depends. Like, yes, it depends on what kind of activities, what kind of essays. But I would say the activities should be, like I said, meaningful, and they should show commitment, actually. What I mean by that is you're not just committed time wise, but you're committed because like there's something about the activity that relates to you or your personality, right? Something that has a natural connection. Because if I just, if I go volunteer and I go, let's say I go to the soup kitchen, but like I didn't really feel like it, I didn't really want to, is because someone else made me, and I go every week and I go for like, months and months or years, but I never wanted to be there, then there's really nothing I can write about it. So yes, it will fill up my activities list, like it will fill up the hours, but then the colleges might think like, well, you spent so much time there. Like, how come you don't have anything to say about it, right? So it's not, it might come across as just not meaningful to you. And that's why I say prioritize activities. So how important are activities? They are important because they show a more fully fleshed out version of who you are, right? Not just that you can study and do well on tests. So I guess my overall statement, like for most colleges, if we take all colleges into the answer, they're getting more and more important. You've also heard that UCs are going test optional and eventually doing their own tests, right? A lot of schools are doing test optional. Yeah, they're getting more and more important. And this kind of goes back to one of the first things I mentioned, is that there are just fewer and fewer spots available for more and more students in applications. So yes, GPA and test score will always be there, but it's more about the activities and essays as we move forward. That's going to be my answer. Yeah.
All right. Next question. My family participated in several webinars organized by you, They are very helpful, many thanks. Enlighteens shows us a lot of successful cases, but I'm curious if any not so successful cases.
Oh, yeah, of course. Okay, I'll give you an example. There was a student I was working with, and this kind of, so the theme of this answer is the student personality matters a lot, the student willingness to have open mind, right, and like embrace the whole process. Let's just say the student was not very open to changing major, not very open to changing school lists, right? But based on his profile, he had really strong academics, but his extracurriculars might have been a little bit weaker, right? And there were some things in his profile that were just, yeah, just a little bit weaker, you know, if you compare it to average. But he was still very kind of like adamant, right, about certain decisions, different paths. And you know, like we do the best that we can. You know, like I can't force you to change your major. I can't force you to write about this for this essay or that. And also the time and dedication put into the essays and the application process wasn't quite there. You know, he tended to maybe like miss meetings, right? Cancel meetings, postpone meetings, and you know, okay, you know, like junior year, right, senior year, both tough times. But at the same time, right, we don't have that opportunity to work hard on the application together. So in the end, you know, I felt like there were certain schools that he maybe could have put on his school list and maybe could have gotten into. But yeah, he was pretty, you know, he wanted to stick with his school list. So in that sense, I would say not as successful because I had schools in mind for him that he just didn't want to include. Yeah.
Okay, the next question. Would you share Nathan's profile, such as GP and activities?
Oh, Nathan, do you want to answer that? Do you want to share your own GPA and test scores and whatnot?
Oh, all right. Let's see. My profile. I can't even remember my GPA anymore. I think I had a 3.67 unweighted, so not exactly super high. I had a 1510 for my highest SAT and a 35 for my only ACT. Activity-wise, I played water polo for 4 years. I swam on the school team for 2 years. I volunteered at a local ER ward in Pleasanton for a year, and I lifeguarded for a year at the Dublin Way.
Yeah, and you took some AP tests.
Oh yeah, AP tests too. AP Computer Science, AP Biology. I got a 5 on the AP Biology test, a 5 on the AP World History test, a 5 on the AP Chinese test, a 4 on the AP Calculus AB test, a 4 on the AP Computer Science test, and then this year I also took AP tests that the scores haven't come in yet. I took the AP Microeconomics test, the AP Macroeconomics test, the AP US Government test, the AP Calculus BC test, and the AP Psychology test.
All right. Well, thank you for attending our webinar, and thank you, Daniel, Nathan, and Sheila, for sharing your experience. And this is all for tonight. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. And I'm showing you my contact information if you're interested to knowing more about Enlighteens in our service. And I hope you guys enjoy the webinar today.